Hi folks, welcome to the AGS tutorial. In this video we'll be talking about creating a new game and creating a character for that game. Along the way we'll touch on views and sprites. So I've loaded up the AGS editor, and the first thing that it asks is what we want to do. So we want to either start a new game, continue an existing game, or continue a recently edited game. In this case, we're going to start a new game. So I select that, click continue. We get the start new game wizard. I'm going to select next. And then we're given three options for what's the template of the game we want to create. We can either create a default game, or you can select an empty game or a verb coin. So we're going to select a default game because what that gives us, it gives us a few graphics and a few GUIs that we're going to use in the game. So we'll just kind of piggyback off of the default game's graphics and things like that. So select the default game, select next. It asks for the name of the game. In this case, we're going to say Sammy's Quest. It asks for the file name of the game, which we'll just call Sammy's Quest also. And then it asks for what folder we want to create it in, which the default folder is your documents folder, which is fine for me. So I'm going to say finish. And that does a few things. Now, just right away, we haven't done anything but created the game, and already we have a runnable game. We can actually run the game. It doesn't do much, but I'll go ahead and click run and move this window over so that you can see it. And immediately we see that we have a game that we can play. The first thing I want to say is ignore. I know that you see on the video, you see actually two mouse cursors. When I'm moving the mouse cursor around, you see sort of a stickman figure, and then on top of that you see a Windows cursor. Ignore the Windows cursor that's on top. That's something that Cam Studio, which is my screen capturing program, that's what it put on top of the mouse cursor, which AGS is trying to draw. So sorry about that. There's really not a whole lot I can do about that. But the cursor that we're looking for is the one that's changing right now as I'm right-clicking. That's the game's cursor. So already we see that we have our character, and we have a blank, sort of a black screen. We can cause the character to walk around by just clicking on different spots in the window. Across the top we have a gray status bar, and then if I move the mouse all the way up to the top, we have our icon bar with our game interactions, our current item, a save and restore buttons, which actually work. You can save and restore the game right now if you want to. And then there's an exit button and a help button. And all these buttons work. And that's without having to touch a piece of code from the game editor at all. So that's really good functionality that we have right away, right out of the box. So I'm going to click on quit, exit the game. So the first thing that we want to do is create our character. Let's create Sammy. So what we do is we go over to characters, the characters option in the project tree, double click it to expand it, and we have one character, and that's the character we just saw in the game. That was the default character. His name is Roger. So if you double click on him, you see that his real name down here on the properties window is Roger. I'm actually going to turn him into Sammy. So I'm going to change his real name from Roger to Sammy. I'm going to change his script name from C Ego to C Sammy. The script name is the name that we will refer to this character as in our scripting when we get to scripting a little later on. So the C is just a syntax, meaning this is a character object, and then Sammy is the name of the object. Typically this will be the same as the real name. It's just that the script name cannot contain spaces. It can only contain letters, numbers, and I think an underscore character. Now if you move up a little bit, you'll see these things called views. And what a view is simply just a collection of sprites. Or a collection of graphics that create an animation. Now I'll just use the word sprite there. A sprite is simply just a graphic. It's just a picture. So if you have, for example, if I click on animate here on the left hand side, we have his normal view, this character's normal view, and if I click animate, that will animate the character's normal view, actually cause him to start walking. This right here is called a view. It's just the series of sprites that make up an animation. So to create a view, we want to create a view of Sammy. We'll need to have a view. Well, to have a view, we need to have sprites. So I'm going to scroll on up to the sprites section of the project tree, and I'm going to double click on it. And here we have the default sprites that are built into the game. We have a blue cup, two versions of a key, and then another object that's used in the demo game. And if we click on the defaults folder here, we have the rest of the objects, or the rest of the sprites that are used in the demo game, including the character, the sprites for Roger. Scrolling down, we have all of the icons across the top of the screen. Here we have the mouse cursor graphics, and we have the up and down arrow. Basically everything that you see on the screen is a sprite or some kind of picture file, some kind of bitmap that was created that you have to put into the game. So what we want to do is load up our own sprites, and I'm actually going to do that in the next video. So, but first, sorry, I wanted to mention a couple things before I go into the next video. I have a little bit of time left on this one. I wanted to mention what the views are. I wanted just to kind of show what these views are first of all. If we go into the views here on the project tree and double click the view 1, we actually see a set of views. And this is again, these are the animation frames for the default character Roger. And we have these things called loops. A view is broken down into loops. Loop 0 by default is for when the character is facing downward. The animation frames for when the character is facing downward. Loop 1 is for when the character is facing to the left. Loop 2 is when the character is facing to the right, and loop 3 is when the character is facing up. Those are just the default views that are the default loops that AGS will use. So in this case, we have each frame of animation for when the character is walking downward, left, right, and up. So if I click on the Show Preview button, I'll actually be able to see what that looks like, and I'll click Animate, and this will show me for loop 0, which is the one we have selected. This is the character walking downward. Now I can just click the up arrow, and that'll show me the next view for loop 1, which is the character walking to the left. Loop 2 is the character walking to the right, and loop 3 is the character walking up. Now you notice this pink color here. That doesn't show up in what you see. In fact, typically the color around the character, in this case it's black, the blackness that you see around the character, typically that's going to be this magenta color, this pink color. But basically what that does is that is a transparent color. That ends up being a transparent color that you can see through that color when you see it in the game. The sprites that I'll show in the next video are actually going to be, every one of them is surrounded by this pink color, and basically that's just what is standard for transparent colors. So that's the reason that you can see this character walking, but you actually do see what's behind the character. In this case they used black, but typically again you use this magenta color, so that's the reason that you see that. But that's what a view is. I just wanted to go ahead and explain what a view was and what loops were. Before I go into the next video, I wanted to say a few things about sprites. When you're creating your sprites, or actually when you first create your game, you want to really decide on whether or not you want your game, what color depth you want to run your game at. You have a couple of options. If you go into your general settings of your game, you have the very first item here says setup, and it says color depth, and by default it's set to 16-bit high color, and that allows you to have up to 65,000 colors. If you wanted more than that, you could change this setting to 32-bit color, and that will allow you to have 16.7 million colors. But if you don't need that many colors, you can change it to 8-bit color. 8-bit color allows you to have any of 256 colors. The thing to note though, if you ever go to 8-bit color, is that at that point you have to start worrying about what's called your palette, your color palette. And you can get to your color palette by going over to colors in your project tree. I'm going to double click there now, and I'm at 8-bit color right now, and it's you can see that I have what's called a palette here. You want to make sure that all the sprites that you create for your game use the same palette. And basically what that means is, every color that I'm using here has to be defined in a certain position in this grid, so to speak. And every single sprite that I create needs to follow this same palette, or else when you load the palette into the game, or when you load that sprite into the game, the colors are going to be totally wrong, because the palette that you use to create the sprite is different from the palette that the game has. So that's something that you want to take care of. In all honesty, you can almost assume that
most of the people that are running your game probably have the ability to run 16-bit high color. I know not everyone does, and so if you want, for the broadest audience, you want to create, the lowest bit color game that you can create, 8-bit color. But most audiences are going to be able to run 16-bit color. That's just something that I wanted to bring up, before I got into the Sprite, so that people would be aware of that when they're creating your game. It really should be the first thing that you decide before you ever import any sprites into your game. What's your color depth going to be for your game. So
I'll see you guys in the next video, where we're going to load up the sprites and create our views and assign the views to the character Sammy, and basically put Sammy to life. He'll be animating his walking, and we'll animate his speech view too, so that you can see his head bob up and down when he talks. So I'll see you guys in the next video.